It brings in President Trump, and Cawthorn and Trump have grown close. Trump didn't initially endorse Cawthorn, but Trump will be now in Ohio tomorrow with J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is running for Senate. Republican primary is coming up. And Vance is, what, second or third now in the polls in Ohio. What are you hearing from Trump world about how they are picking and why they are picking these people who are second and third in state polls? I thought President Trump only picked winners.
Yeah, so it's not only J.D. Vance in this endorsement that's getting pushed back. We know that President Trump also endorsed Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, in the Pennsylvania Senate race over Dave McCormick in that race. That got quite a bit of backlash. We've seen that much of Trump world is very much divided over these endorsements. In fact, in Ohio, I can tell you that there are multiple letters really circulating from Republican leadership in the state, at the county level and the steering committee level to President Trump, basically saying, look, J.D. Vance does not represent our party's values. But, going back to why Trump has endorsed these two particular individuals in particular, there's a common denominator, and they both have a celebrity vibe to them, a celebrity aspect. Dr. Oz, clearly a media figure, and so is J.D. Vance in many ways. I think in J.D. Vance's case as well, I think President Trump likes the idea of someone, essentially, maybe starting out trashing him, but then coming around to
Vance once called Trump America's Hitler, and then he's now had this revival, if you will. J.D. Vance recently told New York Magazine, something our voters respond to on the campaign trail is being told the truth. Yeah, I had one beef 6 years ago. I have a different view today. This is why it's changed is a hell of a lot better than trying to pretend that you didn't say something you did. Again, I go back to how worried is Trump world? Oz is number 2 or number 3 in the polls in Pennsylvania. Vance, number 2, number 3 in the polls in Ohio. David Perdue running for governor against an incumbent Republican governor in Georgia, number 2 or 3. How worried is Trump world about all of his candidates losing? How excited would be the rest of the Republican Party if all of Trump's candidates lose and sort of minimize his pressure going forward?
I think Trump world is split, like I said, in places like Pennsylvania and Ohio. You have some Republicans who are very happy with the endorsement, some who are not. But, in terms of how those who are unhappy with the endorsements feel, I would say they're very nervous. And, President Trump, I thought it was interesting also looking to Alabama's Senate race when he retracted his endorsement of Mo Brooks and endorsed Katie Britt instead. So, you have these 4 critical Senate races.
Right.
Not as much Alabama, but it's a critical Senate primary, I would say.
Well, look, you say that, but if all of a sudden he endorses, say, Eric Greitens in Missouri, and there's a lot of polls that have Greitens now either tied with or losing to a Democrat in what was a Trump plus 14 state, things really, really could get tight for Republicans who, have 1 or 2 seats maybe to play with for a majority. Coming back now sort of full circle here, because Republicans are going to make unquestionably COVID part of the primaries. Who knows whether they'll be able to make it part of the general election. Tie in for us right now this debate within the White House over the DOJ trying to overturn the mask mandate and get the mask mandate back on planes, and the DOJ trying to deal with and fight and keep Title 42 progress, and the White House rescinding Title 42. Is the White House at all worried about this optics of saying there's an emergency in the sky, must keep masks, but there's not an emergency in the border, we should be able to rescind Title 42 and let more people in?
Absolutely. And I think they're concerned about the messaging, because I think we are seeing that Americans on both of these issues, especially I would say on the coronavirus mask mandates, are very confused right now because they are getting 2 sides of the story, 2 very different messages from both sides of the political aisle, but also in a way from Democrats. I mean, we hear President Biden and the White House very much, appealing this overturning of the mask mandate on public transportation. But at the same time, for example, Leland. I was in Harrisburg last night for Nexstar Pennsylvania Senate debate, and I saw that most of the candidates participating in that debate were in favor, of not having a mask mandate, and understood why a mask mandate could be frustrating to voters. And during that debate, Philadelphia decided not to reinstate their indoor mask mandate. So there's a messaging issue happening in the Democratic Party on that issue of the mandates. But also, when you move over to Title 42, same thing. Now the Biden administration is very much trying to clean this up because they know they're under pressure from moderate, vulnerable Democrats who are on the border, and also many who are not on the border. You have New Hampshire Senator Maggie Hassan, for example, making Title 42 a huge issue. So, I think there's a political pressure the Biden administration is facing really from two sides of the Democratic Party, the moderates and progressives on both of these issues. And I think we're seeing them struggle to walk this line.
As you talk to people in the White House, and obviously the White House is not a singular group, there's people who have different opinions inside of it. But what seems to be the fear, the most feared result? Is it worse to alienate progressives, thus your base may not be motivated to show up in the midterms? Or is it worse to continue to really annoy moderates, least they are the swing vote, much like in Youngkin in Virginia, where they went for Biden in 2020 and now end up voting for Republicans?
I think it's a mixed bag. And talking to those close to the White House and in the White House, they will say it depends district by district, state by state. But they always come back to this idea of the quote unquote Biden coalition, how, Biden would not have been able to win if it wasn't for the moderates or if it wasn't for the progressives. I would say, though, that the moderates are probably, it seems, I get the sense that they are more of a top concern. And when I say moderates, I'm talking about a lot of those independent swing voters, voters in the suburbs, for example, who very much turned against President Trump in 2018 and then very much voted in favor of President Biden, but actually split their tickets in many states. And so we saw that Republicans gained seats in the House. So it's a mixed bag, but I would say that moderates and those swing voters probably more of a top priority.
Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.